Okay, so I'll just start with a little bit of housekeeping. So just bear with me whilst I go through that. So thank you everyone for coming to this local plan update webinar. It's very exciting for us to be using new formats such as this, and we hope that you find it very useful as well. This particular webinar is focused on the placemaking topic, and it's an opportunity for you to hear a short presentation and ask some questions of the team. So Kat, if you could just go to the next slide. Thank you. So before we begin the webinar properly, I'd just like to take this opportunity to outline some of the housekeeping arrangements for this session and to explain the formats at a high level, and Catherine will go into a bit more detail about the format later. But please note, first and foremost, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded publicly to YouTube. And that's largely for the benefit of others who aren't able to make the session and are able to tune in later and will be able to watch this recording. All attendee microphones and videos have been turned off and will remain off for the duration of the session. So to ask questions, please use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, rather than using the chat. And as I say, the Q&A function just makes it easier for us to keep abreast of which questions have been answered and which ones haven't. We'll attempt to answer questions verbally, but if we run out of time, we'll make a record and email answers in response if we have missed anything out. So we're going to have a 20 to 30 minute presentation followed by a Q&A session with the panel. And today we've got Catherine Holloway, who's a team leader for sites and policies in the Policies and Plans group. We've got Martin Elliott, who's the head of service for strategic planning. We've got myself, Adam Harvat, Group Manager for Policy and Plans. We've also got Caroline Harris, who's a planning assistant, who will be helping us manage the Q&A function today as well. So next slide, please, Catherine. So what's this consultation about? And this is, for some of you, you will hopefully know this answer because you've already been through the material, but for others, this may be your first introduction to the local plan update. So we're consulting on the local plan update, which will eventually contain a suite of new planning policies to help us tackle the climate emergency from a planning perspective. And this is the early stage of consultation known as a scoping consultation. So this is about seeking agreement on what broad topics should be included in the plan. But it's also an opportunity for us to raise ideas and options rather than detailed policies at this stage. Broadly speaking, what we're looking for from this consultation is an understanding of whether people agree with this scope of policies or not, what their thoughts are on some of our ideas and options, and I guess most crucially, your thoughts on whether we've missed anything, whether there's anything aspects that we haven't considered, whether we're going too far or not far enough, and those kind of ideas would be really useful to hear from you. So we're hosting a series of webinars covering the 5 different topics individually over the summer to help you give you a chance to learn more about the topics and ask questions that you might have. So today is placemaking. We also have flood risk sessions, green infrastructure sessions, and sustainable infrastructure sessions over the coming weeks with daytime and evening slots. We held carbon reduction seminars yesterday, but if you have had wanted to tune into those and you missed it, they were recorded and they'll be put up on our website shortly. They're not there now, but they will be there shortly. And finally, we'd be grateful for any feedback you have on this webinar, just to make sure that we're being as helpful to you as possible, and these can be as effective as they can be. So if you've got any constructive comments you'd like to send us, please use our email address that's on the screen now. Okay, so that's the end of the introduction. So I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Catherine for her presentation on the placemaking topic of the local plan update. Over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Adam. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So this is about placemaking topic area in the local plan update, and it seeks to explore the policies that guide sustainable patterns of development in Leeds. It considers both the strategic placemaking, i.e. the spatial pattern of growth and the location of development, and issues around strategic infrastructure, and engages in the concepts such as 20-minute neighbourhood. It also looks at placemaking in reference to detailed design considerations at a site, development, or building level. It's presented this morning as its own topic, but it clearly shares links with the other topic areas that Adam has talked about in the local plan update, scoping consultation. Sorry, my slides aren't catching up. Okay, so locations for growth. The intention of the local plan update is to look at how new or amended planning policy can take leads towards carbon neutrality by 2030. And for placemaking, this means guiding new developments to locations that offer the best opportunity for active travel, be that foot or cycle, and by public transport, so that travel by car is greatly reduced. Seeking the best opportunity expresses the desire to optimise carbon reduction through control of the location of new development, use of appropriate density, efficient use of land, and the creation of cohesive neighbourhoods. Placemaking is not new. It's about bringing together the concepts of the recognised 17 global sustainability goals. And as part of our aspiration to make Leeds carbon neutral by 2030, we want to ensure that we guide development to the most sustainable places and ensure that all new development is designed to high standards. As a reminder, the purpose of the planning system, as expressed through the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF, is to contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. The NPPF sets out 3 objectives that broadly contribute to the wider factors that influence sustainable and healthy places. 1, an economic objective, to help build a strong, responsive and competitive economy by ensuring that sufficient land of the right type is available in the right place and at the right time to support growth, innovation and improve productivity, and by identifying and coordinating provision of infrastructure. Secondly, the social objective, to support strong, vibrant and healthy communities by ensuring that a sufficient number of and a range of homes can be provided to meet the needs of present and future generations, and by fostering a well-designed, beautiful and safe places with accessible services and open spaces that reflect current and future needs to support communities' health, social and cultural well-being. And lastly, but not least important, is the environmental objective, to protect and enhance our natural built and historic environment, including making effective use of land, improving biodiversity, using natural resources prudently, minimising waste and pollution, mitigating and adapting to climate change, including moving to a low carbon economy. So placemaking at the strategic level is about creating places that support people to live, work and enjoy the environment, incorporating both urban and natural spaces. And done well, placemaking minimises the environmental footprint of development. It brings environmental, economic and social elements of planning together and allows communities to flourish. The current local plan, through its core strategy, sought to provide a framework for sustainable and healthy communities, having regard to quality of life and to protect and enhance the environment. This is achieved through a strategic and spatial approach and a suite of policies relating to the overall scale and distribution of development, location, layout and fabric of places. The current core strategy policy is structured around a settlement hierarchy of city centre, main urban area, major settlements and smaller settlements, and through this, new development is channelled towards the urban areas to avoid travel by private car, as sustainable locations because these places have access to a range of services via public transport and walking. The core strategy guides development towards previously developed land, town centre uses to centres, and economic development towards identified and sustainable locations. The Council adopted its site allocations plan in 2019, and this provides for a range of housing and employment allocations, and these in principle locations for development will not be amended through the local plan update. The local plan update allows us to consider the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on both people and the economy. It has changed the way people work, travel and shop. It's shown a rise in the number of people cycling and resulted in cleaner air and quieter streets. However, it's also shown widening inequality for those who have easy access and connection to green space and nature and access to shops and services, and those who are disconnected from these important facilities. The physical, economic and social characteristics of housing, places and communities have an important influence over people's physical and mental health and well-being, and inequalities in these are related to inequalities in health. Pre-existing characteristics of communities shape their resilience to the social and economic impacts that COVID has had. The pandemic has generated contradictory views that people need larger homes, space and greater distances to stay safe, with less reliance on centrally located offices, given the ability that office workers can now work from home. The lockdown restrictions have reminded us all that placemaking is more important than ever in creating better spaces for everybody, and that our neighbourhoods need to be designed to support people's health and well-being. This means walking and cycling easily, providing affordable and safe housing, easy and safe access to green spaces, and creating opportunities for neighbours to meet. The 20-minute neighbourhood concept has become a focus for a new vision of locational growth. The purpose of the concept is to ensure that neighbourhoods support strong communities and local economies, recognising that easy and safe walking and cycling access to services and facilities is good for health, and that physical activity and less reliance on the private car reduces air pollution. This approach to local growth and placemaking around service centres and hubs is gathering support across the world and is an easily understood way of planning for the way places change. The concept of locating development in sustainable locations is nothing new in Leeds, and the accessibility standards set out in the core strategy go a long way to setting out the criteria for sustainable development in the 20-minute concept. The concept was further explored in the recently published consultation document, the Leeds Local Transport Strategy, which sets out the council's ambitions for Leeds to be a city where you don't need to own a car, and where everyone has access to affordable zero carbon transport options. For Leeds to meet its objective of minimising carbon emissions, it's considered that spatial growth, in line with the emerging transport strategy, should continue to follow a pattern of concentration, particularly around the city and town centres, and with less development in relatively unsustainable locations, and promote walkable neighbourhoods. It is also considered that this should apply to the location of general employment in appropriate locations. And in this context, we're scoping how we successfully integrate the 20-minute neighbourhood concept into the Leeds local plan to guide the determination of planning applications, but recognising the challenge this brings to Leeds with its varied neighbourhoods and rural communities. There's also an opportunity to ensure that the key principles of sustainable development and strategic placemaking, supporting the climate emergency targets and ambitions aligned with health and wellbeing and inclusive growth, are further highlighted front and centre into the local plan. The consultation is exploring whether the Leeds core strategy policies on the locational criteria for non-allocated, i.e. windfall development, alongside accessibility requirements which expect new development to be of a scale appropriate to the capacity of local infrastructure, should and can be strengthened, recognising that the most sustainable urban form is one of concentration of uses, particularly around centres, so that people can be close to work and other services and make use of public transport. We want to understand how people view the 20-minute neighbourhood concept, recognising the challenge this brings to Leeds, and that a one-size-fits-all approach will not work for all our unique neighbourhoods and rural communities. Should we therefore only focus the 20-minute neighbourhood as a strategic objective around strategic hubs, such as transport interchanges or town and local centres? And expanding on the local transport strategy consultation and reflecting upon the recent changes to the Highway Code, which introduces the hierarchy of responsibility aligned with the hierarchy of road users, we're also asking a series of questions around how planning policy might influence or require car-free development and how streets are designed and used. We move on now to the second part of this topic area to consider the detailed design considerations of buildings and sites. The evidence for high quality and sustainable places is qualitative. However, the many reports on climate emergency return to quality of place being central to achieving well-designed places that responds to the impacts of climate change through mitigation, i.e. reducing greenhouse gas emissions and minimising embodied energy, and adaptation, such as rising temperatures and increased risk of flooding. And examples of the types of design features to facilitate this are provided on screen. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, or MHCLG, published the National Design Guide, Planning Practice Guidance for Beautiful, Enduring and Successful Places in October 2019. This makes clear that creating high quality buildings and places is fundamental to what the planning and development process should achieve. The MHCLG have followed this by publishing in July this year changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF. The text has been revised to implement policy changes in response to the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission Living with Beauty report. Alongside the publication of a National Model Design Code and establishing an office or place within the government to lead on embedding beauty, high quality design and placemaking into the planning system. The changes to the NPPF help ensure the planning system creates more attractive buildings and places. The changes include making beauty and placemaking a strategic policy in the framework, setting an expectation that local authorities produce their own design codes and guides, setting out design principles which new development in their areas should reflect, that local authorities should ensure that new streets are tree-laned, and improving biodiversity and access to nature through design. An emphasis on granting planning permission for well-designed development and refusing it for poor quality schemes. Leeds Local Plan has sought to provide a framework for sustainable and healthy communities, having regard to quality of life and to protect and enhance the environment. And all development proposals are subject to a suite of specific and more detailed placemaking policies on the layout and fabric of places, covering use, design, natural environment, green space, public realm, transport, to name a few. And in the context of both climate change and health and well-being, well-designed places have layouts, forms and mix of uses that reduce the requirements on resources, land, energy and water, assisting in increasing the ability of CO2 absorption, sustaining natural ecosystems and minimising flood risk and potential for flooding and reducing overheating and pollution. Taking advantage of topography and layout, achieving passive solar gain, retaining and planting new trees for shade and urban heating and carbon capture and other biodiversity opportunities such as the creation of hedgerows or even the retention of hedgerows, green walls, roofs and ponds and access to healthy food and food sustainability. Making sure that places are fit for purpose and are adaptable, providing and linking to sustainable transport, walking and cycling and promotion of safe, walkable and accessible for all developments, and the 20-minute neighbourhoods where daily needs are met locally, critical not only for low carbon and healthy future, but also for resilient places in light of the pandemic. And lastly, designing out crime, making sure that places are open, well lit and observable. And this has a positive impact on mental health and well-being. Leeds' current core strategy sets out the requirements for all development to consider development management considerations and design principles. And these are well-established and well-used policies and are supplemented by detailed design guidance in the Neighbourhoods for Living and Building for Today Tomorrow Sustainable Construction Sustainability Planning Guides. And in line with the NPPF, the determination of planning applications need to be considered against the development plan and all development control considerations. And as such, existing policy provides guidance on matters such as acceptable land use, mix, type, density, affordability, space standards for new homes, alongside green space, public realm, green and blue infrastructure, connectivity and accessibility, surface and foul water surface sewer disposal, car parking, detailed design considerations, which when read all together help to inform and shape placemaking. It's felt that current policy in Leeds on design and placemaking lacks that strategic weight. This consultation therefore seeks to ask whether Leeds needs, in light of the recent changes at national planning policy, to strengthen and heighten the policy hooks and requirements to ensure that the explicit referencing to health and wellbeing and climate emergency benefits are foremost in mind when development comes forward, and that well-designed and high-quality places are achieved. Well, thank you for listening to my presentation. We'll now open for Q&A.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I hope people found that really useful. So thank you for that. I know Caroline is having a few problems with connection, so I tentatively invite Caroline just to manage the Q&A. But I noticed we haven't got any questions yet, so I'll just sort of pause for a minute just to see if anyone does have any questions they'd like to ask. Just thinking about some of the questions that Catherine posed there in the consultation, in terms of her presentation about prioritising development that's not car-borne, and whether we would have where you would put pedestrians, cyclists, public transport in a sort of hierarchy, those kind of questions, and whether you think we should be going further in terms of having more strengthened strategic policies about embracing some of those ideas that Catherine mentioned in her presentation about the small scale things like hedgerows, but the big scale things to making sure that we're encouraging active travel. But I think we've got one question, Caroline, so over to you.
We do, thanks Adam. Earlier this year I participated in the Leeds City Council and West Yorkshire Combined Authority webinars relating to transport. Is there a linkage?
Yes. Simple answer. Yes. The consultation strategy on the transport vision for Leeds is focused on transport and connectivity and accessibility. This consultation is taking that further and looking at the role planning and planning policy can play in supporting that vision for transport, and linking with certainly the concept of the 20-minute neighbourhoods, that the hierarchy of user within the space, and prioritising the ability for people to make accessible active travel choices within new development. So yes, there's a very clear link there.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. And it's also worth saying that obviously, whilst we are in planning policy ourselves, we're working really closely with colleagues in transport on their strategy, obviously the Connecting Leeds strategy, and we're ensuring that those dovetail really well together. But it's important to understand that there are powers that reside, say, in the planning function, and there are powers that reside in the sort of transportation and highways function. And you wouldn't necessarily want to say, well, you couldn't put planning policies necessarily in a transport strategy, and you wouldn't really necessarily put transport sort of visions in a planning document. So what's really important is that we continue to work together, which we are doing, to make sure that it's a cohesive, coherent vision for the future. But it's a really good point, and yes, there's very, very strong linkages across there.
Yes. Thanks, Adam and Catherine. We've got no live questions at the moment.
Okay, well, just pause there. I mean, we don't need to fill the whole hour if people don't have any questions. That's absolutely fine. But we'll pause there for a minute, and just to give people the opportunity to type out any questions. If there's anything you didn't understand about the presentation or the topic papers as you read it, please feel free. There's no such thing as a stupid question. We'll be happy to try and answer anything we can.
I think, Adam, just in terms of just following on from what you were saying about the links to the transport plan, those links through this placemaking topic, and which is really about living locally, and what the planning system can do to improve living locally, so that people can sort of meet their daily needs within a 20-minute walk from home, either on foot or through sort of safe cycling routes. Don't just extend to transport. We also linking up with colleagues who manage our green spaces and our green infrastructure, and who are involved in planting trees and looking after our biodiversity within Leeds, and also working with health sector colleagues to ensure that local services are linked up with new development proposals as well. We have a question in.
Thanks, Martin. I think you've just answered it, sorry. It's about the different strands apart from planning and transport.
100%, like all
Yes, I preempted that question. Yes, I mean that's those different strands as they relate to this particular topic are relevant in terms of improving place, managing place, etc. But I think yesterday we also talked about what the council more widely is doing to deal with the climate emergency and those aspects of the climate emergency and carbon neutrality that can't readily be done through the planning system. And one of those things was around improving the existing stock of housing and buildings that we have. And we clarified yesterday that the council is currently in receipt of funding from central government, £25 million or so, to look at improving its own stock of buildings, schools, leisure centres, and offices, both in terms of the way they're managed for carbon reduction and in terms of the way that they're heated and powered. But also then looking and hoping that the good practice within the management of public sector buildings can be rolled out to private sector accommodation, and private sector owners can see the benefits of that for long-term cost savings. That's also coupled with efforts that are being made to look at the way that food is consumed, grown, managed, and food waste is disposed of in Leeds. And all of that, I think, really focuses on what are known as sort of category 1 and 2 carbon emissions, which are sort of direct carbon emission impacts from things like the way we travel and the way we construct buildings. But scope 3 carbon emissions, which are around the way that people live and the way that people behave and their consumer choices, are also of relevance to the council. Less so perhaps through the planning system, although it was pointed out yesterday that by creating more locally livable places with a focus on living well with a view to the reducing carbon, that in turn stimulates people to change some of their behaviour. But some of those behavioural changes will be affected by council campaigns and support and training that will come in due course. So in that way, this local plan update is one part of a wider series of activities that the council is undertaking at the moment.
Thanks, Martin. No other questions at the moment. If anybody does think of anything at a later stage or as they digest the consultation material, you can email us at lpu@leeds.gov.uk and we will get an answer to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Caroline. And I think all that remains, if we have no further questions, which it doesn't appear we have, just to repeat what Caroline said, absolutely, please do send through any questions. If something occurs to you later on, please don't think you've missed your opportunity by not asking it here and now. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, so I think all that ends is just to thank the panel and Catherine in particular for her presentation. Thank you, obviously, in particular for all your attendees for taking the time out. I know you're very busy days. It's much appreciated coming here to listen to these presentations. If you've got any feedback as well, please let us know at that email address at the bottom of the screen. So unless there's anything else to say, which I don't think there's any more questions, I will end the webinar now. And you've got half an hour of your day back. So I hope you use it wisely. We'll catch up on the Olympics. Yeah, I'll hope you have